Plugins, the collecting cards of the audio engineer. Do you need to gather these additional plugins, or have you already got what you need right there in your DAW? As always, before you watch this, leave me a comment letting me know how you feel about it. Then when you're done watching the video, maybe comment on that comment and see if your opinion has changed, if my reasoning makes sense, whatever. Let's go. Plugins are a strange commodity, aren't they? Or rather, they're kind of half a commodity because they can be bought, but the second-hand market is not really anything to speak of. Many people, probably me included, have spent hundreds, perhaps thousands over the years on these little pieces of software that we tell ourselves make all the difference. But is buying third-party plugins a great investment, or are we sometimes better off with what we already have in our DAW? Let's find out. Let me start by saying that yes, your DAW likely has everything you need to mix a track. I'm not debating that. A lot of people are quite militant about using just stock plugins whilst letting people know that that is in fact the way forward. To those people, I would say I agree with you. But for me as a Logic Pro user, there are a few things that aren't in that DAW that I need day to day to mix, but there are a few things that would make my life easier. In my mind, the reason you buy a third-party plugin is for one of two reasons. Firstly, because it gives me something I can't do with stock plugins, or number two, because it makes things easier than using stock plugins. The first is pretty obvious, but the second requires a little more digging. Now, I'm not here to tell you whether you should or shouldn't buy third-party plugins. I have a huge collection of plugins that I've bought over the years and regularly use them in sessions because they offer me a certain sound and an element of familiarity. But that sound, that's a tricky part of the statement, isn't it? A tricky one to define. Who says that the third-party 1176 emulation, for the want of a better example, is really better or more accurate to the original than something that comes with your DAW? Logic Pro certainly comes with an amazing array of compressors built in as standard. I actually did an in-depth video on just that. You can check it out at the top. Take a listen to this comparison between 1176 compressors on a drum kit and see if one of them is really the clear winner. It's going to be a blind test, so you'll need to remember which one you think sounds best. The results of that are at the bottom of the screen right now. I certainly don't think that any one of those sounds objectively better, just slightly different when used at the same settings. Well, this is kind of skirting around the point though. It's not about do stock plugins sound the same as paid plugins. It's really about, is it worth paying for extra plugins that aren't already in your DAW? I, for one, am a great believer in having everything in one nice, neat package. So for me, channel strips are a massive bonus. SSL-style channel strips from companies such as Waves and Brainworks are great. More about Waves in a moment. And they give me, personally, a great all-in-one solution for processing a track. The key thing here is that I don't need to open up a separate gate, compressor and EQ because they're all in that one plugin. Well, that's all well and good, but is it worth paying for a third-party plugin that has them all in one package when it's not really that much more work to open up separate instances? Well, if you're processing 24 tracks across a mix, it's probably going to save you a bit of time, but really you're achieving something pretty similar, albeit with the paid plugin giving you a bit more of an SSL-y type character. Plugins that don't exist in the stock plugin collection in your DAW are maybe the first place you should be looking. Need a compressor? Well, your DAW likely has a few of those. But need a dynamic resonance suppression tool? You're probably going to need to fork out for something like Soothe 2. Resonances are a weird one, aren't they? Check out my video at the top now for the lowdown on them. Plugins like D-Bleed from THR and Silence by Black Soul Audio are great examples of plugins that do a similar thing to those in your DAW already. They gate the signal to an extent, but they take it a few steps further. We're talking ridiculous levels of control over gates on snares, even when you've got crazy levels of hi-hat spill. Seriously, give them a try. Links in the description. What about plugins that have that little extra sauce? Something like Dirty Dog Reverb from Safari Pedals. It's a great plugin that was built specifically because there is a processing chain from a famous mix engineer, and it made sense to include that in one neat package. The Dirty Dog Reverb includes a drive circuit going into a reverb and then a second drive circuit afterwards, as well as a gate. So this actual chain is nothing new. We can do this in a DAW, but will we be able to get the same sound? Maybe not. Perhaps an approximation of it. Well, here's what I came up with. So a quick mess around for 5 minutes has got me relatively close, but it's not quite the same, and there are far more moving parts there. Also, side note, the agony of choice is a weird thing, isn't it? When I wanted to set up a drive plugin going into a reverb, I've got like 50 amp sims, 25 distortion plugins, saturators, everything you can think of. And as for reverbs, too many to list. So which do you choose? Well, if you go for the all-in-one solution, it's kind of there for you and you don't have to mess around. This is the weird thing about choice, isn't it? I must admit that when I want to compress something in a mix, like a vocal, there's a brief moment where I think, I've got too many compressor plugins, which one do I choose? And I inevitably reach out for something that I go for every time, and the rest just get left unopened. This brings up the subject of plugin subscriptions and whether you actually need all the plugins you get with them. One of my favourite case studies in the value of plugins is the good old-fashioned Waves bundle. Back in 2007, the Waves Mercury bundle came in at over 10 grand. Seriously, I'm not making that up for the sake of content. The Mercury bundle will cost you over 10 grand. Adjusted for inflation, that's around 15 grand today. To be honest, I don't really know why I bothered working that out, as if you weren't going to be shocked by 10 grand, but you would be by 15 grand. The UAD Complete bundle is currently listed on Plugin Boutique for 10 grand as well. I'm not sure if that really supports my argument or goes against it, but it's crazy no matter how accurate they are to their analog counterparts. Anyway, I'm straying from the point. In that Mercury bundle, if you bought it today, you get over 190 plugins. And check this out, by my reckoning, 18 compressors. 18. That's not including channel strips, any of the artist stuff with compressors built in, limiters, maximizers. I just don't know if I actually need 18 different compressors. But you can now get that every single Waves plugin on a subscription for the low price of 250 quid a year. There's two ways of looking at that. Either buy all the Waves plugins for like 3 grand or whatever it will cost you in bundles now, or pay that and more cumulatively over a monthly period and keep paying for eternity. You can never really sell the plugins that you buy outright anyway, but the question still remains, do you need 18 compressors in your life? I'm not trying to bash Waves plugins here, they make some cool stuff, so I'm told, but in my opinion, there are better options. The Plugin Alliance XXL bundle is actually a really interesting one that seems to be a similar thing to the Waves bundle that I've just slated, but when you get beneath the surface, I actually think it makes a load more sense. So look at that Waves bundle. Yeah, there's some bits like X noise, some of the phase tools, maybe some of the saturation stuff that you may not already have in your DAW, but really if you take a long look at it, the Mercury bundle is just full of alternatives to what you already have. Different EQs, different compressors, different reverbs, a bunch of artist stuff, Tony Maserati, CLA, you know the ones. But by my own definition, those artist ones, they took everything into a nice, neat little package, so it could be quite cool. But the XXL bundle from Plugin Alliance, you get a load of compressors, EQs, all that stuff, but a whole lot more that you don't get elsewhere or as stock in your DAW. You see, what Plugin Alliance do is they look at what's out there, see what's useful and cool, and bring them to the bundle. And there's a difference there. The Kirchhoff EQ, for a start, is an incredible addition which gives you loads more features than you have in your DAW's stock plugins. Drum Exchanger is a cool little drum trigger application, Metric AB to help you reference, Streamliner to check how your mixes are going to sound on different streaming platforms. There's a few standout plugins there. I've not even touched upon any of the analog model plugins or guitar amps. The point is that something like the XXL bundle is kind of equal parts a load of cool sounding plugins and equal parts new plugins and stuff that doesn't exist in your current DAW as stock or are a complete pain to create yourself. I could have a subscription to a set of plugins that are mostly just different, just alternatives to what I already have, or I could have a subscription that includes that, but also includes a load of tools that I don't already own and are unique. Anyway, this isn't an advert for the XXL bundle. It's about whether you actually need third-party plugins. Well, the answer, as with many things, is no, until you do. You don't need those hundreds of different analog style compressors, EQs, but sometimes they're nice to have. Sometimes an LA2A plugin is nicer than using the stock compressor plugin because it does its thing with 2 knobs as opposed to 5. I get that. If you medically need a dynamic EQ, maybe your DAW doesn't have that, you're going to have to put your hand in your pocket and buy one, or get a free one. TDR Nova would be an excellent choice. Incidentally, Logic Pro doesn't have a dynamic EQ, and its multiband compressor is pretty janky looking, but Cubase has likely the best stock EQ I've ever used in any DAW and puts all the others to shame. FL Studio has some plugins as well, I think. So in summary, no, you don't need third-party plugins, but if you need a plugin that does a certain job and your DAW doesn't do it, then yeah, you're going to need something third-party. My advice though is before you start spending hundreds on plugins, firstly look at the free stuff. There are loads of amazing free plugins out there, and secondly, buy something you don't already have, not just something that's an alternative to something you do already have. But as always, I want to hear what you think, so drop me a comment below and I'll see you again soon. Take care.